Let's continue with our chat now regarding the second quarter crime stats, which have revealed an increase in murder, kidnappings, as well as sexual offences. Now, as the year draws to a close, we are reflecting on the 2021 crime statistics, what they reveal about policing in South Africa, and also what lessons we can take into 2022. To talk to me about this, I'm joined by co-founder and director of NSA Global Security Consultants, Rory Steyn. Rory, a pleasure to have you back on our lines. When we spoke earlier on, we just spoke about the levels of crime in this country. But let's speak especially about the levels of violent crime and contact crime still being amongst the highest in the world. The national murder rate is about 6 times the global average here in South Africa. From a policing point of view, would you say that our women and men in blue have their hands full as things stand right now?
Good evening, Nhlanhla. Apologies for earlier, and hello to everybody listening or watching. Absolutely, I think it's pretty clear. You don't need to be any form of expert to know that the police simply do not have a grip on the crime situation, which is an ever-evolving one. Some things stay the same, some change, criminals do their homework. But the fact of the matter is, Nhlanhla, that we constantly have, whether the interval is 3 months or a year, where we see the crime stats announced. It's almost as the minister searches for a golden or a silver lining. He's looking for some good news, but there just isn't good news. And the constant refrain that I've been singing is that it's not going to get better and it's not going to improve until we improve our intelligence capacity of the Crime Intelligence Service, and until we get the vacancies filled. I mean, I cannot understand that in a country with a youth unemployment very close to 50%, that we aren't recruiting amongst our brightest and best university graduates, getting some really sharp minds, and just look at this whole thing differently. Just get people in there, put them in a room together with a blank canvas and say, how would you tackle this? Why aren't we doing that? Why are we not training and retraining our police in the latest strategies, being deployed against them by criminals? I mean, you look at the cash in transit heists in Nhlanhla. In the period under review, there were 60 incidents. We know what they're doing. We know that the guys are using explosives. Why haven't we got intelligence operations in there trying to find them out? Trying to find out those routes and how are the criminals getting hold of explosives? That's the kind of creative thinking that we're not seeing.
I also want us to reflect a bit on the impact on the bail of alcohol sales. A lot's been said about this, and this was highlighted as one of the likely reasons for the decrease in crime in South Africa over the COVID-19 period. In your view, is there a link?
Yes, I think there is. Now, look, I enjoy my glass of red wine and a cold beer when it's hot as much as the next guy.
Right.
I also really, bleed along with the workers and the everybody involved in the wine industry. I mean, our wine industry is one of the finest in the world. So we can't have, proper operations and commerce and livelihoods affected by alcohol bans. But I think the reality speaks for itself, that when we do reduce alcohol sales over weekends, for example, or put a curfew on it, then we simply do see fewer people pitching up at our emergency rooms, on the typical Friday night and Saturday night times. So I think it is fair to say that I wouldn't say bans, but the restriction on the sale of alcohol has had an effect, yes.
So other experts are also saying that the COVID-19 pandemic, which has put the country under lockdown since the 23rd of March in 2020, has had a very complicated impact on crime levels. First, it has expanded the range of laws that can be broken. For instance, on the first day of the nationwide lockdown, there were about 55 arrests for the contravention of the regulations of the Disaster Management Act. In the little under a year that followed, there were also over 400,000 more arrests for such new offences as violating curfew and also breaching these gathering rules. Let's speak about the handling in response to, or rather by the police, and just the handling of policing when it comes to such cases.
So I have a double or a two-pronged answer to that. The first one would be to say that it was almost unfair to place this additional burden on our police. You know, our police have got their hands full, like we are seeing. You know, they are supposed to be preventing crime, and I mean real crime are these, you know, the contact crimes, the trio crimes, murder, rape, gender-based violence. That's where the focus should be. Now they have been asked, with very little time to adjust, again, training and, you know, methodologies and tactics, they were now asked to, frankly, police many of those regulations that were completely ludicrous. I mean, you know, you think of the classic one where they were pulling surfers out of the sea. Yeah. What risk to the proliferation of a virus was there to surfers sitting on their surfboards out at sea? That is ludicrous. And those cops should never have been asked to do that. I'm not blaming the police. I am blaming the police leadership. This thing was just not thought through. I don't have the solution. I don't think that deploying troops in the townships and seeing them make people crawl through muddy puddles of water was the solution either. But I wonder whether there was, in fact, you know, a cogent solution at hand. My sense, Nhlanhla, is that we must never detract or deflect the police from doing their primary job, and that is to keep you and I and every South African out there safe from crime. So I don't have a solution, but I do see, and I really feel for the cops that were put in a very unenviable situation, because this was new to all of us, and that included the SAFs.
Now, Rory, in the same breath, although anecdotal reports are that a few of these cases were prosecuted, some of them probably did result in otherwise law-abiding people getting a criminal record. What has been your assessment in this regard? Yes,
and to the extent that I am quite angered by that. I'll give you one example. A doctor who was called out to a hospital to perform emergency surgery, he successfully saved the patient's life and was then driving home, I don't know, 11:30, 11:45 at night, was stopped by the police. They said, "Where are you going?" He said, "Well, I'm a doctor and I'm returning home. I've just been at the hospital performing an operation." And he did not have his essential workers permit with him. And the police refused to verify his story. Like he said, just call the hospital. They'll tell you I've been in the operating theater. I'll tell you it was this hospital and that theater. And he spent a night in jail. Now, how is that right? In any society, that cannot be correct. And, you know, as I say, it seriously angers me. But there were other instances of people that were intentionally breaking curfew, ignoring regulations that should be dealt with in a harsh way. I wonder sometimes whether the police that we have out there on the shifts, on our streets, in the vehicles, you know, have the necessary discretion at all times. You know, are they overworked? Are they stressed? Yeah. What is the reason that you wouldn't verify a story like that, where a doctor, you know, who was called out in an emergency is now returning home and he's just over the curfew? That shouldn't happen.
And speaking about the capabilities of our police force, I want us to also reflect a bit on the unrest and the riots that rocked South Africa back in July and also claimed the lives of about 342 people here in Gauteng as well as KZN. Now, the unrest has seemingly also exposed the cracks in South Africa's intelligence gathering efforts, as it seems that officials were playing a catch-up game during this period.
Yes. So, as I've constantly said, and including on this interview, crime intelligence has been failing dismally for a number of years. And the fact that we were caught with our pants down is one thing. The fact that those who were behind this insurrection were also senior members of certain of those intelligence and law enforcement bodies is an entirely different matter. And again, it's just, you know, it's frustrating to you and me and Nhlanhla. We're ordinary citizens, but it's frustrating that nobody has yet been brought to book. Nobody has been charged. We don't understand who was behind it, although we understand that there was a very almost professional orchestration of that unrest. Why has nobody been brought to book? And if senior police or intelligence or even military officials were involved, then absolutely they should be the first ones to be standing before a judge.
Now, Rory, we are fast running out of time, but I also want to highlight an aspect that you touched on about the budgetary constraints that SAPS finds itself in. What has been the impact of this and also hampering the South African Police Service's efforts to combat crime here in the country?
Well, I'll tell you, Nhlanhla, and I was horrified to see that when the budget was adjusted just recently, the police lost, was it something like 140 million rand off their budget? Why would you take money away from the police of all places where you're trying to find extra cash? Don't take it away from the cops. But to answer your question, that money or the greatest need for spending needs to be for proper professional equipment for our police officers. They should have the latest communication technologies, whether it's radios, or protective equipment, not PPE as in the medical sense, but more in the sense of body armor, non-lethal weapons like tasers. But anything to make their job easier should be prioritized, as should the training. I keep banging the drum of training. I wonder how much police training is happening, because I can tell you that if you look at the private sector and the businesses that you and I and your listeners work in, that's the first thing that gets cut, isn't it? Team building doesn't happen, training programs are put on hold. That cannot happen in South Africa with the police and the crime problem that we've got. That must be prioritized, and that's what's happening. So when you take 140 or whatever million rand out of a police budget, I can promise you, you are losing your intelligence capacity and you are losing your training capacity, and that simply shouldn't be. And what about the vacancies? I mean, I don't know how many. I was hearing a number of around about 38,000. I don't know whether that's accurate, so please don't take it as if I'm quoting that as accurate. But I mean, it's a number that's far too high, and a priority needs to be given to the recruitment. Get our best and brightest graduates in there.
Well, that was a security expert, Rory Steyn, speaking to us there about the most recent crime stats and also looking at the impact of the COVID-19 over efforts to fight crime in the country.